This is the January 19, 2023 Planning Commission hearing. I will call the hearing to order now at 1:02 p.m. Ms. Esparza, can we please have roll call?
Thank you. I'll go ahead and take roll call. Vice Chair Bonderson,
Here.
Commissioner Bauke,
Here.
Commissioner Boss,
Here.
Commissioner Lodge, Commissioner Wardlow, and Commissioner Wiscombe.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you. So we are going to jump right in, and the first topic on our agenda today is the nomination and elections of our chair and our vice chair. I will open the floor now for nominations. First for chair. Would anyone like to make a nomination? We have Commissioner Wiscombe on the list. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bonderson. I'd like to nominate you as chair for this coming year.
Thank you. Do we have any other nominations for chair at this time? No. Before we continue, I'm going to open the floor up for nominations for vice chair. Do we have any nominations? I see Commissioner Wiscombe and Wardlow. Would you
nominate Commissioner Bauke for vice chair? Is that?
There's agreement. So are there any other nominations at this time for anyone else for vice chair, please? I do not have anyone in queue. So we can now go forward. Ms. Esparza, excuse me. Can we please have a roll call vote for both chair and vice chair together?
Thank you.
Oh, pardon me. Oh, excuse me, yes. We do need a motion in a second. Let's do that first. So do we do the motion for both at this time together?
You can do it as one motion, yes.
Okay. So may I please have a motion to move forward with the nomination of chair for Commissioner Bonderson, myself, and vice chair for Commissioner Bauke. I have Commissioner Wiscombe.
So moved.
Thank you. Second, do we have Commissioner Lodge? Lodge, thank you. So now we can go ahead and do that roll call vote, please.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and take the roll call vote. Commissioner Bauke,
Yes.
Commissioner Boss,
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge, Commissioner Wardlow,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Bonderson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we move forward, let me just take a moment to thank everyone. That was a nice, smooth process. And I'd like to just say I'm very honored here today to be appointed as chair of our Planning Commission. I'm excited to take on this role and the duties that come with it. As chair, I just want to share a few words, and I just want to say that for me, I aim to promote an environment of positive communication, collaboration, and cooperation here. Something I feel personally very strongly about, and I would really like to share here, is that I strongly believe that in our professional life, in politics, and even in our personal life, we don't have to see things eye to eye. And we don't have to agree, we don't have to vote the same way, but we do want to come into each of those relationships with respect, with accountability, and with transparency. And as chair, I would really aim personally to bring that here into this room. I also hope that we have the opportunity to listen. We're good at that most of the time, but I really would like to put conscious effort forward, not only to listen to one another when we're up here at the dais, but also to make a conscious effort to understand why we feel the way we do or the reasons that we vote a certain way, because we have the opportunity to learn from each other. Especially when our approach differs or when our opinions differ, that's when we need to listen the most. So I just want to say I'm really looking forward to working together with each of you and to move forward with quality projects and improved policies. I think together we can listen and learn and contribute even more powerfully to bring about the best outcome for our city, and it will lead to better and wiser decision making. So I'm very, very excited to work with all of you and be in this position for this 2023 year. Without further ado, let's get back to business and get started on the work. So next, we have, let's move forward with preliminary matters. Ms. Esparza, do we have any requests for, oh, excuse me, Mr. Busk. Do we have any continuations, withdrawals, postponements, or ex-agenda items?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. We have none.
We don't. Okay, great. And do we have any announcements or appeals?
Yes, thank you. I do have a couple announcements and some appeals. The first is an emergency coastal development permit that was issued for work at the harbor to address some damage from the recent storm. And that permit was issued by the Coastal Commission on January 11th, and work has begun, so you may see that going on down near the harbor.
Okay.
I would also like to announce that we have received an appeal of the project at 621 West Mitchell-Terena Street. That's the Santa Barbara Neighborhood Clinics project, and that will be going to the Planning Commission on March 14th. We will need a plan, I'm sorry, so yes, we'll be going to City Council on appeal on March 14th, and we will need a Planning Commission representative. As a reminder, Commissioner Bauke made the motion, seconded by Commissioner Higgins for that project, if that helps you to find a representative for the meeting.
Mr. Busk, should we do that now?
Yes, please,
Yes.
that would be great.
Do we have any volunteers to represent the Planning Commission? Commissioner Bauke, do you happen to be interested in moving forward in that role? All right, and you have the date, it was March?
March 14th. The meeting starts at 2 PM. I don't know when our item would be on that agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Busk. Commissioner Wiscombe, please.
Mr. Busk, I just had a question. I didn't see the Edgewater appeal. Was that settled?
That will be my next announcement.
Oh, okay, okay. Thank you.
We have a lot of announcements here today. With regard to the first announcement, that was the harbor emergency
Coastal Development Permit.
CDP. Does anyone have any questions about that while we wait? Any interest to know more? Okay. You can do the March 14th? Okay. And you only need one representative, is that correct?
That is correct.
Very good.
Okay, thank
you
you
like to
very
go
much.
on?
Yes, my final announcement is the appeal of the project at 2315 Edgewater Way, which I had previously announced, but we didn't have a council date. We now have that council date, and it is going to be February 7th. As a reminder, that vote, the motion was made by Commissioner Wiscombe, seconded by Commissioner Bonderson. Commissioner Bauke was absent. So if we have a representative for that project.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Wiscombe?
Sure, I'll do it. If it conflicts with my calendar, I'll let you know.
Okay.
But as far as I know, I can do it. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. And that concludes
Yes.
all the announcements. Very good. So I'll stick with you for one more moment. And, yes? Do you?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, we had the other project on East Mitchell-Terena appealed, is that correct?
Commissioner Wiscombe, no, that project at 533 East Mitchell-Terena was not appealed.
Oh, I thought it was. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Well, that's good news. One less announcement for today. Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Busk. We're now on to item D of today's agenda, review, consideration, and action on the following draft planning commission minutes. We have a number of them to review here today, so let's start with December 8th. Planning Commission minutes for December 8, 2022, and the resolution that goes with it. It's 014-22. This is for 1364 Shoreline Drive. I will open this up to my fellow commissioners. Are there any comments on either the minutes or the resolution? I see none. Oh, I see. Commissioner Wiscombe, please.
I'm sorry, no one had their light on, so I just, I would move the December 8th, 2022 Planning Commission minutes and the accompanying resolution.
And before I take a second, just one moment, are there any public speaker comments for either the minutes or the resolution? This is not, it's for the minutes. You are welcome to come up. No problem at all. So just one moment, sir. I want to make sure that we have a timer ready for you. We'll have 2 minutes to speak, so if you don't need all that time, it's okay, but please feel free. And your name? Did you get that for the record? Did you get his name for the record?
No, can you please repeat that, sir? E. Planet Thunder Striker.
Yeah, I just wanted to note for the record that at this time, I was definitely here in Santa Barbara, and there might be issues on these minutes related to some of the things I was talking about during public comments.
Okay. That had nothing to do with the minutes, so we will continue forward. That wasn't with regard to the December 8th minutes? Okay, very good. Thank you for your comment. I appreciate it. So let's move forward with Commissioner Wiscombe's motion. Do I have a second? Commissioner Lodge, please. Thank you. Ms. Esparza, let's do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. I'll go ahead and take a roll call vote. Commissioner Boss?
Abstain.
Commissioner Lodge? Commissioner Wardlow?
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe?
Yes.
Vice Chair Bauke?
Yes.
And Chair Bonderson.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to be sure, are all the mics on? Because some of them sound much louder than others. Perhaps we want to bring them closer. It'll help with the recording. Thank you. So let's move on to, it's bullet point 3, 4, and 5. That is the December 15, 2022 minutes, Planning Commission Resolution Number 015-22 for 533 East Mitchell-Trina Street, and the Planning Commission Resolution from the same day, same minutes, 016-22 for 621 West Mitchell-Trina Street. Fellow commissioners, are there any comments on either the minutes or either of those two resolutions? No. Are there any public comments for the December 15 minutes or resolutions? I see none. So let's have a motion. Commissioner Wiscombe, please.
Sorry, I'll move the December 15th, 2022 minutes and the accompanying resolutions.
Thank you, and I see Commissioner Lodge in queue. Would you like to second?
Yes, second.
Thank you. Ms. Esparza, a roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. I'll take the roll call vote. Commissioner Lodge?
Yes,
Commissioner Wardlow?
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe?
Yes.
Commissioner Boss?
Abstain.
Vice Chair Bauke?
Yes.
And Chair Bonderson.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we, before we go into public comment, we're still in the preliminary matters. I want to take this moment to also welcome our newest planning commissioner, Ms. Lucille Boss. It's very nice to have you here and taking one of our empty seats. We still have an empty seat that will be potentially filled shortly, possibly by our next planning commission hearing. But Ms. Boss, welcome. I'm excited to have you here. Let's move on to E, and that is comments from members of the public that pertain to items that are not on today's agenda. I don't have any speaker slips, but Ms. Esparza, do you have any comments, any in queue remotely?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. Currently, we do not have anyone in Zoom participating. Back to you.
Was that for public comment now or for the minutes? Because I have you down for the minutes.
We're so old before. I have
Okay,
other
that's
things.
not a problem. I just misunderstood the timing. So you do have 2 minutes, and your 2 minutes will start
2
as-
minutes, the agenda paper says 3.
Is it 3 now? Okay, my apologies. Last year it was 2, but not a problem at all. Can you set it up for 3 for us? And you will be welcome to begin as soon as you see the timer on your screen.
I'm
Go
E-Planet
ahead.
Thunderstriker. I have spoke at the Solvang Planning Commission in like July about a desalinization plant, and I've given consideration if maybe the thing that happened in Monterey where there was a marathon session to approve something is related, but I'm not having that reputation following me when I'm doing a lot of things, and I've just had an issue where I had a police report and I was in the administration and trying to have future contact with the administrator, not the supervisor that's involved earlier today. It was an issue that needs to be addressed to them. I wanted to mention that I was considering coming here related to not just that, but also the training session with TAVO, which was canceled and not rescheduled. And I have so many issues that something like that I was interested in watching and maybe helping to organize some of the things that I have in my 25 pages, which I've spoken about to the city council related to corruption, which is related to a document theft in the clerk's office where I filed a complaint earlier. And so I am like in this thing and not able to talk about maybe Santa Barbara using its desalination plant to sell water as maybe what constitutes appropriate capital, or even maybe to give it to like other countries or to ship. Either way, I mentioned because UCSB I'm working on their sidewalks, maybe have colored or tiled things with some kind of border sponsor, and I don't know how that could be incorporated into new sidewalks. While I was at the Planning Commission meeting, I was only in Sylvang for 1 week, and I had spoken during the public comments for City Hall the previous week, and there were no issues, and there were no issues when I was discussing these in front of the Planning Commission, and somebody left and they called the police. And that's part of the kind of corruption that I'm dealing with. So, let's see, I guess so in closing, maybe I'll stop by in Teva because there's so many issues here, and, because they had that, switch up with the city managers, and I'm just wondering, maybe the most senior person I could be talking to in the future would be whoever's below the new stuff. But thank you guys, you've been appreciative. I know I had a lot of all over the place, and so I'm E-Planet Thunderstriker. I was probably nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for World Citizens Government Organization. Countries have the option for 2 slots. One is a government individual. China approves of that. So
Thank you very much for your public comment. Ms. Esparza, do we have any more public comment at this time?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. No, currently we do not have anyone participating via Zoom. Back to you.
Thank you very much. So now we are going to move forward with item 3. This is a new item, and it is the review of the draft 5-year capital improvement program for fiscal years 2024 and to 2028. We have Michael Peace from Public Works to give us the staff presentation. Mr. Peace, are you ready? The mic is yours.
You're ready. I'm going to introduce our Public Works Director for a brief introduction, and then I will do the report.
Good afternoon, Chair Bonderson and Commissioners. I guess my first order of business is congratulations to Chair Bonderson and Vice Chair Bauke. My second order of business is to issue an apology in that we did not do as much preparation as we would have liked to for this presentation. We've been very busy the last 2 weeks in Public Works, so it might not be as smooth and synchronized. And maybe even more importantly, we lost our Analyst 3, Christy Velasquez, to a promotional opportunity outside the city, which is great for her and terrible for us. And she, if you know Christy, was enormous in her importance in the presentations. But we've got a great team, and they will still do a great job. Just my initial remarks in speaking to the Planning Commission, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, that the capital improvement program is really the city staff commitment to the long-range material and operational wellness of the city. There are a few exceptions. There's IT and communications equipment. Today, there's no such thing as long-range IT, and 5 to 8 years, it's already obsolete, but it's really important for our operational readiness. Obviously, those are included, but most of these projects are long and enduring, 40, 50, even more years. So we put a lot of effort in to make sure that we're prioritizing right. There will always be way more requirements than we have resources to fund, but we take everything into consideration to make sure we're doing it right, and are committed to not only the process process of getting these projects through the correct approval process, but then putting the right level of engineering and contract and construction management expertise to them to make sure we're delivering the city very efficient and cost-wise products. So with that, I will get out of the way of the great Public Works team and let Michael take it over.
Thank you, Mr. Mauer. Madam Chair, Commissioners, I'm Michael Pease, Public Works Business Manager, and pleased to present to you today the draft capital improvement program for fiscal years 24 to 28. So today's purpose is for Planning Commission to find that projects added to the draft CIP are consistent with the general plan. These are an example of some sample policies that are consistent with new projects in the draft CIP. These include the general plan policies for circulation improvements to improve traffic flow and provide improved access for pedestrians, bicycles, and transit through roadway improvements, travel demand management strategies, and others. Also accessibility, to prioritize universal accessibility for persons with disabilities, seniors, and other special needs populations. Also local coastal program policies for harbor dredging and beach nourishment and sea level rise adaptation. A capital project is generally defined as an activity that creates, improves, replaces, repairs, or maintains a fixed asset with a total cost and inventory of $100,000 or greater, with a life expectancy of more than 5 years. An example of this is shown on your screen. The Las Positas and Modoc Roads multi-use path project was constructed a separate pathway for bicyclists, runners, and pedestrians of all ages and abilities on Las Positas and Modoc Roads. For budgeting purposes, large one-time expenses such as major software applications and studies or plans are also included in the CIP for transparency and communication with the community. Examples of fixed assets include land, parks, buildings, streets, bike paths, as you see here, bridges, stormwater facilities, and wastewater systems. The goals of the CIP are to provide a planning document for capital improvements over a 5-year period, including supporting information as to the necessity for these improvements. Also to identify unmet capital needs based on anticipated funding levels, and to provide a plan for capital improvements as a basis for preparing the 2-year capital budget for the upcoming budget cycle. And it also assists with securing grant funding. Capital project prioritization is not a one-size-fits-all process. This is due to a variety of specialized funding sources and the framework and a framework of adopted plans and policies. The common prioritization theme among programs is safety as most important, followed by maintaining existing infrastructure. As you can see on the slide, needs, plans, and funding all play a part in the project prioritization process. Needs, including safety, existing assets, and new demands, plans from council and boards and other agencies, and then available funding and also restrictions on funding. Projects compete for funding, whether it's restricted funds, grants, or general fund monies. The CIP is a living document. There are a lot of moving pieces affecting prioritization, mainly funding availability. Projects listed in the first 2 years are considered budget-ready projects and have been prioritized by that program area and become the basis for the preparation of the city's annual capital budget. This is an overview of funds and restrictions as mentioned on the previous slide. Starting at the top and going clockwise, the city's general fund accounts for activities and services traditionally associated with governments, such as parks and recreation, library, and police and fire. These are primarily financed through tax-generated revenues. Next are enterprise funds, which are funded primarily through user fees, and these include airport, downtown parking, water, wastewater, and waterfront. Internal service funds account for funds received from departments to pay for services provided to other departments in the city, such as building maintenance, information technology, and fleet management. Designated funds may include a voter-approved tax that is designated for specific types of projects. A good example of this is Measure A, whose funds are designated for streets projects. Other funding sources, as you can see, include grants and debt issuance or loans. Projects included in the first 2 years are considered budget-ready projects, as I mentioned, or have been identified as a critical need. The table before you is the first 2 years of the CIP broken down by projects proposed for funding and those that are unfunded. Also included is an estimate for Measure C funding, roughly $23 million a year for planning purposes. Measure C funds will be determined and allocated during the budget process, and project amounts will be updated accordingly. Combined, funded and unfunded projects total roughly $1.6 billion. Approximately $646 million of total funding have been identified and proposed, with an additional $138 million over the CIP, 5-year CIP, in Measure C funding to be allocated during the budget process. Unfunded projects total $108 million, including future needs that are beyond the 5-year planning period. This chart shows where proposed funding is coming from. Proposed projects total $784 million. These projects have identified funding or are proposed for funding. Starting with the largest piece in the upper left corner, Measure C projects have a proposed funding totaling $213 million. Water and wastewater adjacent to that, in the blue and gray pieces, have a combined total of $239 million, which includes enterprise funds and state revolving fund loans. Grants and public-private partnerships from various sources total $83 million. Airport includes enterprise funds and Federal Aviation Administration funds totaling $78 million. Streets and Measure A funding that is not labeled combined total $57 million. And lastly, waterfront totals $48 million. Unfunded projects, as I mentioned, total over $108 million. This chart shows who is looking for funding. A large amount of unfunded projects are seeking grant or public-private partnership opportunities, and combined those total $372 million. Since there is uncertainty associated with successful grant acquisition, these projects are considered unfunded for purposes of the CIP. Also unfunded are airport projects in the amount of $109 million, anticipated debt issuance for the police station of $80 million, general fund projects totaling $103 million, waterfront projects totaling $52 million, and the water fund at $50 million. Staff identified 307 projects in the draft fiscal year 24 to 28 CIP, of which 68 are new projects for this update. Airport has added 19 new projects and will be addressing some needs outlined by the Airport Master Plan. High priority projects include construction of a service animal relief area to relocate and enlarge the service animal relief area to a location closer and more convenient to the passenger terminal. And these projects appear in your staff report as well. Community Development added a project for facility improvements at the 630 Garden Street building. Fire has added 3 projects guided by goals of the fire department's strategic plan, as well as regulatory compliance. These include upgrading the automatic vehicle response and routing system to allow units to be dispatched using GPS technology, which will have a profound impact on response times. Information Technology added a high-priority project for technology and equipment upgrades at the city's Emergency Operations Center, or EOC. Library has added 4 new projects. Significant projects include one at the Eastside Library, including the construction of a garage to safely store the new Library on the Go van and to install security equipment and cameras. Public Works Downtown Parking has added 7 new projects, of which 3 are priority projects for roof repair on lots 6 and 7, and a structure and facilities assessment update. Facilities does a great job identifying needs at various city facilities to maintain city infrastructure. Most of the new projects listed here for Public Works facilities address general fund facilities, including renovations at 630 Garden Street and City Hall, and the highest priority repair and replacement of the city's aging radio infrastructure that is critical for public safety and city operations. Water and wastewater also added high-priority projects to support additional planning efforts to adapt the water and wastewater systems to the potential impacts of sea level rise. Sustainability and Resilience is a new department and has added 14 projects to the CIP. A high-priority project for this department is to develop and regularly update a 5-year sea level rise adaptation implementation plan that further refines and prioritizes actions. The CIP is also brought before the Planning Commission to streamline the streets capital program review and approval process as required by the city's circulation element, providing the opportunity to review and comment on the proposed streets capital CIP and provide guidance to the city council in the physical development of the city consistent with section 806 of the city charter. That concludes the CIP update for fiscal years 24 and 28. Representatives from each department are in attendance today to assist with answering any questions you may have regarding the new projects. And again, today's purpose is for the Planning Commission to find 68 new projects in this update to the draft CIP consistent with the city's general plan. The other 239 projects in the draft CIP were previously found to be consistent with the general plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pease, and thank you, Mr. Mauer. You said that this wasn't particularly well planned out. You didn't have a lot of time, but it sounded pretty great to me. I wanted to commend you for a very clear and concise presentation. I'm sure we have questions to get us a little further, but thank you very much for this presentation. I will first take public comment. Mrs. Esparza, do we have anyone in person or remote that may like to provide public comment at this time?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. Currently, we do not have anyone participating remotely, and we did not receive any speaker slips. Back to you.
Thank you. I will turn to my fellow commissioners for questions. First, we have Commissioner Wiscombe in queue. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the presentation. Thank you very much. It was very thorough. I have quite a few questions. A couple came up during the presentation that I'll ask first, and then I'll go through the questions as I went through the document. You mentioned 372 million. That's how many grants the city is seeking, the total number of grants the city is seeking at this point in time. Is that right?
Commissioner Wiscombe, Chair Commissioner Wiscombe, yes, that is over the 5-year period of the CIP. That is how much these projects are seeking.
Okay.
In
Okay.
public
Thank you.
private partners.
And I don't know, I guess this would be for Fire Chief Males, if, I hate to have you step up here. It's just a quick question, because several of us on the commission were involved in the the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, the one that got implemented finally. And I just wondered, are any of your projects that you have a result of that plan?
Chair and Commissioner Wiscombe, the short answer is no. The 3 projects that we have are completely independent of our wildland community plan. However, wildfire community plan. However, what I can tell you is that over the last 2 years, City Council 2 fiscal years ago allocated $100,000 toward vegetation management, and this last year allocated $200,000 toward vegetation management. And I'm also really pleased to let you know that the Coastal Commission, or excuse me, the Coastal Conservancy, we were just notified of an excess of $500,000 grant that the city just received for vegetation management all over the city, which will be a huge relief to the city's general fund. So we, at the fire department, and specifically our vegetation management unit, are really going to be thinking outside the box here, and we are looking at actually hiring temporary hourly workers in the off-season to actually conduct the vegetation management using that money. So it's really a win-win for the city, because we were successful in getting this grant, and it's going to take a big relief from the city coffers.
That's great news. That's great news. I know for many years, the fire chief has appeared here, and we said, we need that community wildland fire protection plan. So when we finally got it, so that's really great news. And will the equipment be, this is kind of off topic, but since I asked the question, will you be using equipment for that, or hand workers for that, or both? Is that, I seem to recall from the plan that there's kind of you use some equipment where possible, and then you do handwork where possible.
Chair Bonderson, Commissioner Wiscombe, you're absolutely right. So with the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, we have a myriad of options for getting the work done. We are able to hire contract crews, private companies that are able to go in and get the work done. However, using right now as an example, it's very, very tough to get private companies to do work because they're inundated right now. Yeah. One of the best resources we have is the California Department, CAL FIRE. They have hand crews. Specifically, they have hand crews that are stationed in Ventura. And we are able to contract with them on a daily basis. As long as they're not on an incident, we can contract with CAL FIRE to have their hand crews come out, and they do an amazing amount of work for a minimal amount of money. So it's a preference to use them, and then occasionally we'll use our own folks, but that's really pretty limited. So what's going to be really nice with this grant is that, again, we're going to be able to likely hire some individuals that can focus on working all over the city. So they'll be our employees on a temporary basis.
Great. Well, congratulations for that. As we spoke earlier before the meeting, I would like you guys to have more money, so, which will be one of my comments when we come to that, but we're on to questions. Thank you, Chief Males. I appreciate your comments. Okay. I had a question, just a general question about the airport and the FAA funding. I was pretty impressed by the amount of FAA funding that's been granted at the airport. And is this funding ongoing so that there'll be more available in the future? I hate to have you all come up here. It could be
Madam Chair, Commissioner Wiscombe, Sarah Iza, I'm the Capital Development Manager at the airport. Yes, some of the projects that have been added are FAA eligible for grant funding, and that's approximately 90% eligible for funding from the federal government.
And that's ongoing funding. So as we progress through the years, you'll continue to apply for FAA grants.
That's right.
That's funding. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. It was
It's
quite
entitlement.
quite impressive. Okay. And then I just had one question about the crosswalk at the terminal bus stop. It seems to me this could be construed as a public safety project. I mean, since our airport is increasing passenger service and flights, and I just wondered, is there a reason why it's not funded? I mean, it kind of begs to me, public safety, let's fund it as the airport continues to grow.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Wiscombe, yes, we have moved that project up in our priority list. As recently as today, we've been talking about getting back together with Public Works to make it happen. There is a need for it.
Great, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's a terribly capital-intensive project, so, yeah, okay, great. So that's all I have on that. Thank you very much for that. And then I'm going through my list because I kind of just went through the document, so I'm maybe going to skip around because the East Side Library Master Plan, which is on page 37 of 107, and the Resilience Hub Campus Project, which is on page 73, they look like they belong together. The master plan's a very exciting project, but are these departments coordinating with each other on these two projects? Because they're both in separate, one's on 37, the other's on 73. So I'm seeing this a lot. This is not the only time I'm going to ask this question, but, and also, if you could just describe the Resilience Hub Campus Program in just a little bit of detail. No, yeah.
You're welcome to use either mic, wherever you're
Is this on?
comfortable. It can be on. Go ahead.
Chair Bonderson and Commissioner Wiscombe, Melissa Hetrick, Acting Energy and Climate Manager. So the Resilience Hub is in planning phase now to really define what exactly that means. But at a minimum, it's an area for the community to go during an emergency where there would be electricity, so a microgrid that, like, should the power go off, and other resources during an emergency. And then during non-emergency times, it would be a place for people to have other resources. And that part of what we're working on with the county is defining exactly what the best uses are for a resilience hub. We are working with the library in conjunction with the master plan, and we're really both in planning phase.
Okay, so that you're working together, yeah, because when it skips around like this, I'm thinking they look like they belong together. So, and I appreciate the explanation. The name's pret's pretty sexy, but it kind of needed an
know what you
explanation. I
mean.
probably shouldn't have said that, but it's too late now. Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, and then I want to talk about in community development, 630 Garden Street. This is another one where, so I looked at the projects at 630 Garden Street. On page 28, there's the one for $150,000 in FY '23 and '24, which I think is as I remember, the kind of interior renovations of the space. Then later on, under Public Works, we have 630 Garden Street capital renovations, which is on page 45, starting in '23-24 with $500,000, and it totals $15.5 million over 3 years. And finally, 630 Garden Street Public Works building renovations, starting in '24-25, FY '24-25 for 2 years, totaling $21 million. So this is a grand total of $36,650,000 over 3 fiscal year periods. So I'm just wondering, is there a reason why these projects aren't under one umbrella? Because for public perception, it would seem to me that the economy of scale is not there on such a large amount if they're not under one umbrella. So if you could just address that, and I'll make a comment later about perhaps cross-referencing them if that's, you know.
Hi, Chair Bonderson.
Is your mic on? Yeah.
Chair Bonderson, Commissioner Wiscombe. My name is Angela Oslin. I'm the Facilities and Fleet Manager for the city. I work with Public Works, Clifford Maurer here as our director. In answer to your question, currently, we're undertaking a facilities master plan campus review for the Laguna Block and the 630 Garden Block. As part of the Phase 1 initial recommendations that came out of that, there's a number of years, I would say, to achieve what the end product of that master plan looks like. It's a 20-year goal. So in the interim, there are some work items that we'd like to do to improve the security at 630 Garden, and then also start to plan and design for a larger construction project. I hope that answers your question. So it's interim independent projects towards a long-term goal. The Phase 2 of that master plan is not yet complete, but the functions still remain at that facility, and the conversation currently is that we need to improve and harden security for our employees and for the public.
So I get that part. I absolutely agree with that part of the message. So it's the 36 million, 36.6 million, we'll call it. Is that going towards some construction, or?
And the page that you're looking at is?
It's on, well, the first one is the smaller project, which is on page 28. And then we have on page 45, the $15.5 million project over 3 years. And then on page 46, we have the $21 million project. See Mr. Gullett coming up here. That's never a good sign.
Did you want to jump in?
You're welcome to take this mic if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah, Chair Bonderson, I can speak to the smaller project on page 28. That's Community Development's project.
Right.
And that's more of a retrofit of our existing cubicles to make it a better work environment for everyone's on Zoom. So it's a much different work environment than we had pre-COVID. And it's a more immediate need. And it may not conflict at all with a long-term project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gullett. Yeah, okay. So are we getting some construction out of the other two, which are on page,
45.
the 630 Garden capital renovations, and, which is 15.5 million, and the 630 Garden Public Works building renovations, which is on page 46, I guess, which is 21 million.
Yeah, Chair Bonderson and Commissioner Wiscombe, I'll jump in here, and this maybe gets to my original apology. This one these are both related in the same project. We are, and as Ms. Oslin said, we are still in the very beginning stages of the master plan. We have, in addition to community development and public works organizations in that area, not all of Public Works is in 630, but a large portion of our administrative and our operational staff is in that complex. Across the street, you have Public Works, and then you have Parks and Rec as well. Some of those facilities are actually temporary facilities that they've been in for a very non-temporary time. Yeah. So this is trying to address that, and as you can see by the numbers are large. And so this is not going to be something that you will see construction in the next 2 years. That I can guarantee you, but it is important that we establish the master plan for this project, and then as emergent requirements have to be resolved, we're working against a plan, and then as funding can be identified, hopefully we can bring all, or at a minimum, pieces in a proper sequential manner to bring that plan together. So this is the initial step in what's going to be a long process.
Okay, so the master plan's going to dictate, and
Correct.
the master plan's going to include the Parks and Rec on Laguna.
Yes, it
Okay.
will. And
That's a good answer from me.
There's other things as far as, I mean, we've gone, Ms. Oslin has gone as far as thinking about workforce housing, which is essential to our employees, to making sure we have some that live in the city, whether or not that we can, through the puts and takes of a master plan, we can do some accommodation for that. We're not sure yet. Obviously, everybody knows that's challenging in Santa Barbara, but it's something we are taking a look at.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much for that answer. I like the workforce housing concept. I know someone sitting to my right loves that too. So, okay. And then in Public Works, Streets / Transportation, I'm just curious about this. There's the Santa Barbara Junior High multi-use path gap closure on CODA, which I'm very happy, and I see Ms. Grant coming forward. Hello. I just wondered what's the status of the project? Because we reviewed that area on Planning Commission, yeah, and I'm so glad that the project is underway. So, yeah.
Yes. Commissioner Wiscombe, through the chair, happy afternoon. Yes, we're pleased to report that that project is in design right now. It is funded by a local grant, the Measure A program, and under their Safe Routes to School. And we hope to be in construction for that portion of the multi-use path this summer.
Oh, great, okay.
And then this will tie in with the larger Eastside Community Paseos project as well. But that was the one short missing segment along a larger
Yeah.
bike network connection.
Yeah, and that was my next question to you before you leave. And you mentioned the SBCAG, Caltrans SB1 Cycle 3 grant. Did you get that grant, or when do you expect to hear? I think you applied at the end of last year.
Yes, we did apply at the end of last year, and we meaning the SBCAG and Caltrans, but we coordinated with them on the grant. It's for the Highway 101 widening to fund the remaining portions, but there are parallel projects and mitigation projects associated with that, and this is one area that needed some additional improvement for active transportation, so we collaborated with them for that portion.
So do you have the grant then?
We are waiting at, I believe it's June of 2023 that we will find out. And if we're unsuccessful for that, it's in our capital improvement program, which is a critical factor for applying for other grant opportunities.
Right, okay, great. Thank you so much for that, Ms. Grant. I appreciate it. Okay. And then I had some questions on sustainability and resiliency, and maybe a suggestion. Do we have?
Do we have someone to represent that?
Well,
Commissioner,
let me
Chair
just
Bonderson.
ask the questions.
Thank you.
There's the 30-year waterfront adaptation plan. It's on page 63 of our documents. And I just was curious, you list specific documents, but I believe they should also, applicable documents would be our local coastal plan update that we completed several years ago, and also the California State Lands Commission 1925 Tidelands Grant with the subsequent amendments. I think those are important documents to include in applicable documents. Ms. Hetrick?
Commissioner Wiscombe, yeah, that would be good additions to.
Okay, good. That was an easy one. Okay, great. And then also under sustainability and resiliency is the Master Drainage Study and Stormwater Adaptation Options Report. So what areas of the city is this master drainage study going to cover?
Those would be all the low-lying areas, in particular, the area south of Highway 101. But we would also be looking at areas that flood above that could be affected by changes in rainfall patterns from flooding.
Okay.
Really, I would say that You can think of what just flooded, and it will include much of those areas. So any areas that are potentially subject to increased flooding from changes in rainfall from climate changes and sea level rise combined. So
Okay.
most of the drainage system would be assessed as part of that.
I was hoping you'd say it includes State Street.
Yeah, it would include State Street, yeah.
Okay, because that, I think, I'm a big believer that that needs to be part of a master plan, and, to look at options is to have a, kind of a master drainage capture and treat plan for State Street, yeah.
Yeah, Commissioner Wiscombe, through the chair, I would just, to address that, as I'm sure you're very aware, we do have a State Street master planning process
Right.
underway, and the drainage on State Street, no matter what options we come up with, is probably the most significant engineered or infrastructure issue. So that is actually part of the State Street master plan.
Great. I'm glad to hear that,
Yes.
because I think there's probably some pretty exciting ways that we could handle that, and maybe get some housing on State Street with a little bit less money spent by private developers if there's a, if there's a system there. That, I mean, kind of part of the problem is they can't capture and treat because they don't have the room. So, yeah.
Right,
So, yeah.
we are definitely looking at that.
Yeah, okay, great. And then, okay, I already asked about the Resilience Hub campus program, so I don't need to ask about that. So then I just have two more questions. In the proposed CIP, I counted a little over $78.6 million in projects using Measure C dollars. So have these funds been committed from Measure C revenues for the next few years, in consideration, I mean, assuming that Measure C continues this robust performance? So these are already dollar commitments that Measure C is making? I know, Mr. Pease, you said $23 million annually, which is, yeah, about right. So, yeah, having been a former member of the first Measure C committee. Yeah, okay. And I didn't see the police station in the CIP, and I know that's separate bond, but are we not making any progress on that? Usually there's something in the CIP about some step we're taking on the police station.
Yeah, I meant to mention that at the beginning, is that's already in the CIP. So these are just new projects before you, and we are making great progress.
Okay.
On the police, or I would say we are making on-schedule progress. I don't want to overpromise here. We're making on-schedule promise. And we have as you know, we have a new police chief, Kelly Gordon, and relatively new. I think she's been here 4 months now. And she's brought some great insight into help informing the final design, and that's where we're at right now. We're working with our architects and getting the final design together.
Great. Okay, thank you. Well, I appreciate you all sticking with me and my fellow commissioners sticking with me while I ask my questions, and I am all through for the moment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. Next, we have Commissioner Lodge. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was also impressed with about 90% that the FAA puts into the airport projects, but there isn't any FAA funding for the parking. So is their funding is entirely restricted to the things relating to handling of, like, landing strips and lighting and so on, things relating to the handling of aircraft? Is that the difference?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Lodge, thank you for the question. The funding for the parking structure will not be funded by FAA. However, a portion of the structure will be funded by CFC. It's a car rental facility charge. So a portion of the structure will be used by car rental companies, and they will be funding a portion of it, approximately 25% of the total.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the lavatory waste station. I'm sure you've looked into this, but it seems kind of, I was a bit shocked, I guess, to say that you have to truck it up to the waste material up to Santa Maria because the Goleta Sanitary District can't accept it because of things that are in it. Is there, I'm sure you've looked at this, but I'm curious, why? And isn't there some way to pre-treat it so that it could go to Goleta, just across the street, instead of to Santa Maria?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Lodge, thank you for the question. Yes, it is a complicated situation. Right now, we have a temporary fix, and that is to ship the waste to Santa Maria. It pencils out to be much less than creating a new laboratory dump station at the moment. So the cost benefit just doesn't quite pencil out for us. That said, we are looking at new technology to pre-treat and then send to across the street to Goleta.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the 630, I was puzzled by 630 Garden. I take it what's being done, well, I'm puzzled because the building is relatively new. That is the building that fronts on Garden Street. But I gather this extends through the block to the next street, or are we having to redo the building that's relatively new, or is it other parts of it, like the so-called temporary buildings that have been there for decades?
Chair Bonderson, Commissioner Lodge, in effect, it's effectively an overhaul of the existing building. So there's, again, as we talked about, some interim measures between here and there, but the final vision of the building includes additional space for staff. Our facility space the needs have grown since then. Our staff sizes have grown. The configuration of that existing building is really difficult to right size and pare down spaces in order to accommodate the bigger staff because there are so many challenges in it. So it's really a design and a major renovation of the existing building. So we would maintain the existing building in this scenario.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is about the Arroyo Burro project. There's already been a restoration project between Cliff Drive and the beach. And then there was another one relatively recently completed further upstream, like across from the entrance to the recreation facilities across the street. And is this to do the part in between those two existing restoration projects?
Commissioner Lodge, through the chair, we have Melissa Hetrick here to respond to that.
George Johnson.
Okay, George, thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. George Johnson from Creeks. So I think you're referring to the area between the open space and the estuary?
Right.
Yeah, so that's on the long-term plan to look at that. The Creeks Division owns that, or Parks and Rec owns that property. And then there's Public Works right-of-way along that section. There's also a steep section that Caltrans is responsible for repairing. They have not done that yet. It was part of the relinquishment of that highway when they gave it to the city. So that section is an area that we'll look at that has not been restored yet. And exactly what it's going to look like, we don't really know right now. We haven't done any preliminary work, but we're IDing that area as a potential future restoration site.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. Do we have any other? Yes. We are going to take a 5-minute recess now. We want to take a moment to check some of our technology, so if you could all be patient with us, we're going to go into recess. We will be back at approximately, let's say, between 2:10 and 2:15, depending on how long it will take. We're in recess now. Thank you. going to reconvene, so please take your seats, and I'll give you all a moment. It's currently 2:15, and we are back in session. I believe, Commissioner Lodge, you were finished with your question. Very good. Commissioners, I would like to open it back up. Is there anyone who would like to take the next question period? Very good. Commissioner Boss, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the funding sources, specifically grant funding. For a number of the projects, grant funding has been identified, but not a specific funding source. And on a number of them, it says seeking funding. Can you clarify if potential funding sources, whether they're competitive grants or other grant-funded sources, have they all been identified, or are there some that we're still trying to find a potential grant funding source?
Commissioner Boss, through the chair, there's a variety of grant sources, both identified and unidentified. And I think we would, if we want to get into each one, we would have to have each department come up and kind of speak to their specific projects. So there's just a great variety there, but certainly identified sources that they're actively applying for as well.
Thank you. Vice Chair Bauke or Commissioner Wardlow, do you have any questions at this time? No. Okay, well then I will take the turn, and if you care to have questions afterwards, I'll check back with you. So I have a question specifically on slide 7. It might just make it easier for me to direct the question. On that slide, there is yes, there's a bubble to the left that says debt issuance or loans. And I was interested in knowing a little bit more about that. Do you mind just freely speaking about what that is and how we define that category, please?
Madam Chair, yes. So debt issuance is a common financing mechanism that can be used for a variety of projects. Certainly larger projects where we cannot cash fund them is certainly a larger consideration, such as the police station that was mentioned earlier. I think other similar projects, maybe water and wastewater infrastructure, those can be also very costly. Does that help?
Yes, I'll follow up with a question for more clarification. So is it fair to say that this is a category where they may not be funded in other ways, so we spend the money and then we go into debt for those? Is that what that means?
Chair Bonderson, as Mr. Pease brought up, the police station is a great example. Our current working estimate is somewhere in the range of about $80 million. Measure C is where we will fund the police station out of, but we don't have $80 million in any given year to award a contract and the support for that contract at that level. So our finance director will, with permission of council, of course, will go out and get bond funding.
Okay.
And so that's considered debt funding. So then we get a bond, and then we have to pay it back, and we pay it back through Measure C, but essentially, just like a mortgage on a house, you're in debt until it's paid off.
And that makes a lot of sense. So that was a really good explanation. So we pay it off, but first we go into debt to get the project done, then we pay it off over time. Excellent, excellent. And I believe it was slide 11, although I may not have caught the slide right away. It was with regard to unfunded projects. Let's see, at the bottom left. I was interested to just know more about why we have that category and where it fits onto the pie, or does it fit onto the pie? I'm sorry, the whole pie is unfunded projects, but sorry, let me ask this a different way. Excuse me. Unfunded projects. Why are these projects in an unfunded category? Why don't we have types of ways to get, to make those fundable projects? I just don't understand the term. Why is it unfunded? Thank you.
Yeah, Chair Bonderson, as I mentioned in my opening remarks is that our requirements far out exceed the city's resources and always will. It's not unique to here, it's common to the federal government all the way down to the smallest local government. You have more to do than you can afford. So to demonstrate that we are looking into the future, we put together requirements between needs and wants well into the future, just so that to demonstrate we are aware of these requirements, but we also classify them as unfunded so that there's not a public expectation that this project is going to be accomplished in the very near future. That we reserve for our funded projects. But it is important that, from a transparency and awareness standpoint, that we identify these.
That feeds very nicely into my next question. I didn't expect them to necessarily be connected, but let me come back to that. So the next question was going to be, how do you, as a group, overseeing these projects on this packet, how do you choose the priorities for this fiscal period? And therefore, the second part of that comes back to this slide. Are these the slides that just didn't make the cut? Are these the projects that didn't make the cut and therefore they get bumped down to the unfunded but future intended projects?
Madam Chair, on this slide, it demonstrates some of the prioritization process that goes through, that happens during the process. And so, yes, if something's not prioritized with existing funding, then it would certainly fall into the unfunded category.
That answers my question. I have one more follow-up. I think it'll be the last one. Looking at just the packet you've provided, and then looking back at that unfunded list, of course, that doesn't go into deep explanation of what each category is, but I would look at some of the things in our packet and say, well, maybe that's not a priority in comparison to something that's on the unfunded list. How did you make the decision of what goes here and what goes there? I can give you an example to make it easier to have the conversation. Something, for example, that may be recreational. I have Los Baños, for example, or in a different category, paving improvements or painting of poles in comparison to what may be on that unfunded list that could be a little bit more of a greater benefit to the community, or maybe a more important project long-term. How do we define which comes here today and which stays on that list?
That's, Chair Bonderson, I would say, it's a long and complicated process for which every director of each department within the city is responsible for being the advocate and the being able to identify the needs that fall under their area of responsibility. And then it's brought forth together amongst the executive team and obviously overseen by City Administrator Bjork to ensure that there's proper priorities and equity across the staff. And then we go through the commission and the political process where it goes before council, and all those inputs come in to ultimately define what projects are prioritized at the top. So for your example, there's been many Parks and Rec projects over time. Director Zachary is always advocating for more, again, more requirements than we have money, but she also has a responsibility to look at the greater needs of the city, as every director does. And then we collectively, in a professional setting, look at what's on the table and come up with what we believe is the best list, and again, with the oversight and direction of the city administrator.
Thank you. And I just want to set a disclaimer. I'm not questioning your decision-making personally. I was more for an understanding of how these get put on the list. And I just assume some of these have been perhaps on that list for a while before they get shuffled over to this list. And that's really where my curiosity lies, is how do you go about making those shifts over time? I assume some of them could be very subjective. You know, what's a priority to me may not be a priority to the other department and whatnot, and they just take turns. My last question has to do with the master plan. It was on page 45, 46. Commissioner Wiscom touched on it. And I wanted to go into a little bit more depth in a slightly different direction. I was curious to understand, based on what I heard you say, that potentially in this fiscal period, the 2024 to 28 period, ultimately you're most likely going to be working, probably focusing on the master planning portion, not the building construction portion, but the master planning portion. The question is, how much of the total that you've presented in the packet is for master planning, and how much is for construction? And will what you don't use be carried forward into the next fiscal period, and will we see those numbers shifting as you move into the next phase?
Chair
Welcome.
Bonderson, hi again. So in order to answer your question, the big picture is that the master planning process is a long kind of period of time. The total cost of that project is in excess of $20 million at this time. So this is one small portion of kind of biting off a piece of the overall master plan accomplishment period. Did that answer your question?
I'm going to rephrase my question. Hopefully we'll get a really straight answer, because I'm not sure.
Okay.
You may have, but I'm not sure if you answered. So the number that we see here, the two numbers on those 2 pages we see here, those only cover the master planning portion, not the phase that follows with construction and so on. Is that correct?
The master planning portion of this project is already underway, and those funds are encumbered. So this actually covers design and construction.
And that was not clear, so thank you for the clarification.
welcome.
That actually concludes my series of questions, but I now have Commissioner Wardlow in queue. You may want to stay there. Please, go ahead, Commissioner Wardlow.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson, and thank you, staff, and for all of this information and all of the work that everyone has done to do this. Following up on Chair Bonderson's question, so understanding that the 15 million here that we're noting, talking about the 630 Garden capital renovations, when we talk about the potential of workforce development housing, and that could be included in this, how is it that this is potentially going to be included but has not yet been decided, but we arrive at this 15 million number? Because from my perspective, I don't really understand yet where $15 million would be going for this. And obviously, if workforce development housing was part of it, that would make a lot more sense to me. But otherwise, I'm a little lost. So I'd love a little bit more understanding, especially since my understanding from your last answer is that this has been, that we are allocating this funding. This is moving forward.
Let me clarify, Commissioner Wardlow, through the chair. We have encumbered the monies to execute or to work the master planning process. So we have a firm that took all the requirements from the Public Works, Community Development, Parks and Rec, everybody who currently using that space or identified for that campus area in the future. The 15 million and the other figure, 21 million, they are at best plug figures because the plan isn't even done yet. So there's no way that we have a firm value that we can say with confidence, this is what we're talking about. But anytime you're going forward with a CIP, even if it's unfunded, you're going to put a plug figure in there just so people have an idea, so the commission has an idea, the public as they read this, what scope we're talking about. The incorporation of workforce housing right now is a concept. It is not at a point where it's in a plan, but it is something that we have identified, and we are looking at every possible avenue within the city. As you explained, it's not easy. That is a tough puzzle to solve, but it's one we are committed to putting effort in to do our best to, and more than likely, we're not going to get a solution at one location. But if we can get incremental solutions, that's better than no solutions at all. So I guess to answer your question is, these numbers are nothing more than plug figures at this time.
That is very helpful. So a follow-up question to that is, when we see the three different broken out pieces around kind of the renovations for Garden Street, the office space aspects that we talked about, is the reason that we call out the office space and the kind of new reconfiguration of office space something specific? Is that because it's required, or it's because you just know you want to do that? And if so, does it give that more priority? Because to me, if we're going to be breaking out things that would be encompassed in this massive $15 million aspect, I'd love to see workforce development be called out in a way just like we're seeing office revitalization space being called out in a specific way. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I think the distinction is the office space is an immediate need identified right now to improve operational efficiency and effectiveness today. So not that the master planning isn't going to do that, but it's going to do that in a grand scale. This is a need that was identified by Director Isaacson and his staff that's needed in the near term. So that's the distinction, and the scale of the projects is substantially different. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate you explaining this to me.
And I'm going to follow up one more time with the direction that Commissioner Wardlow has put us in. I'm interested to know the renovations that are in the first part of the project at Garden Street. Is that area, I don't want to lock you into an answer. I want to be careful how I phrase this. The master plan of the whole area will clearly intend to develop all of the pieces that work together as far as our city's needs. The space that's being renovated, is it expected to remain for that use, and therefore those renovations long-term would not be replaced again in the future?
Chair Bonderson, yes, that's exactly right. That building is intended to continue to be used, and so that's why we're talking about putting funding towards it at this time.
Okay, that makes sense. And when we talk about a master plan, do you have an estimate of it? Is it a 15-year master plan? Is it a 50-year master plan? What's your timeline in your minds?
Thank you, Chair. It is expected to be a 20-year master plan.
Okay. And yes, that's okay. And lastly, because of the final answer you gave me a moment ago prior to Commissioner Wardlow's follow-up, you spoke about the master plan development of the physical paper master plan. It's already underway. The funding you're requesting here in those two parts is for the design implementation, so the follow-up. I'm assuming that the master plan funding that you received in the past is going to get us to wherever that point is, and then this money will then kick in to continue us forward. Is that correct?
That's correct. This is intended to carry us forward on the planning.
And lastly, is construction of, when you use the word implementation, I'm assuming that's construction to conclusion. Is that part of this budget, or will that be coming back to us at some point in the future when more need arises?
Thank you. It's intended to be completed. This building is intended to be completed at this time.
Well, that's good news. That's good to hear. I have Commissioner Lodge in queue. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is just a comment, and I think it's a splendid idea to consider housing in with the city's offices and workspaces and so on that are needed. Having a mixed-use project like that is a great idea, and so I do hope that gets included. Thank you.
And before we go any further, I just want to check in with Vice Chair Balke. Did you want to comment, or ask any questions at this time?
No, I believe the fellow commissioners have asked every question I've had marked down, especially Commissioner Wiscombe. got most of them, and the rest of the comments have addressed them. I do have, I'll just put a big question out there, and I presume there's an answer for it, I presume we're not talking about the Housing Authority because structurally they're considered a separate entity outside of the CIP? Or, because I would think there would be all kinds of capital improvements under their purview. I don't see them anywhere in this conversation, so is that a city structural thing, or?
Yeah, through the chair, Vice Chair Balke, you're correct. This does not include housing authority projects as they're a separate entity. This is internal to the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Balke. And we are now going to go into the deliberation period. I just want to remind everyone that our goal today is to vote on whether the draft 5-year capital improvement program is consistent with the general plan. That question is on your screen. Now that we have screens, it's a useful tool to remind us what we're doing here today. Let's begin with Commissioner Wiscombe, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can certainly support the purpose of today's meeting, but I did want to make some comments, and I hope that we can make comments and keep them in the minutes of the meeting. Is that possible, Ms. DeBusk? Yeah, okay. I just want to start with the fire department. All the fire department projects are to improve public safety, and I went up to Chief Mills before, and I congratulated him. They just did such a great job with our atmospheric river events over from January 9th on. And I just think I was disappointed in the funding, I guess. I was pleased that they got the grant. Congratulations on that. I think that's great. But I just think that more emphasis needs to be placed on public safety. And I hope that the fire department gets some additional funds in the future. The Central Library Faulkner Gallery AV equipment upgrade, that's on page 34. To me, this is a much-needed project. Any of you who have attended public meetings in the Faulkner Gallery know how frustrating it is. It's a community center used for broad purposes and public meetings, and it just has an antiquated audiovisual capacity. And I just believe this project should be a priority. And the other one is the Central Library Fire Protection. That's a public safety project, and I was really dismayed to learn that the majority of the Central Library remains without fire protection. We had the Central Library fire of 1986 in Los Angeles, and I feel the project should be prioritized. I'm very pleased that the Braemar lift station rehabilitation is gaining some traction. That's been on the agenda for I don't know how many years. And the wastewater and water system sea level rise adaptation report project, which is on page 75. To me, this is an essential project. This is critical infrastructure, and it can be threatened by sea level rise. I think that should be addressed. And then I'm going to make a general comment. A lot of us talked up here about 630 Garden Street, and we were a little bit confused, and I was confused, which is why I asked the series of questions I did about the three projects that you see. Mr. Gullett addressed the one. I kind of understand that. That's kind of a standalone project, but I'd hate to see that renovated and then you do something else that re-renovates the project. So I just feel that anyone in the public that scrutinizes the CIP and where the money is being spent, and I'm sure we have community members that do that we note where projects should be interlinked, so they don't look like separate projects and we're spending, 15 million on this and 21 million on that, and they're separate projects, and that they don't have any connection for economy of scale if they have the same name on them. So whatever footnote that happens to be, I do suggest that they be cross-referenced. And whether they're in the same department or whether they're in a different department. I mean, I think the example, one of the questions I asked was on the, the Resilience Hub Campus Project under Sustainability and Resiliency is linked to the East Side project. Is it the Library Master Plan? I think, yeah, and the Library Master Plan. So I'm feeling that even though they're two different departments with two different budgets, that we need to show the public that we're working together as a city to make it as efficient and the economy of scale is there for the projects and our dollars are being spent well. That being said, I think you guys did a fantastic job. Thank you all for being here. It's the one time, as I said to Commissioner Wardlaw, it's the one time we get to see most of city staff here. And it's nice to see you. I'm sure you don't. I won't say that. But I really appreciate your answering all the questions that we had. And, as I say, I'm happy to support this. I think that the draft CIP is consistent with the general plan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. Who would like to speak next? All right, we have Commissioner Boss, please.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of comments. I first want to appreciate staff for seeking out, pursuing, and applying for grant funding, especially when it's competitive. I appreciate everyone being proactive there, especially looking forward to projects in future years. Second, I look forward to these master plans, including workforce housing. I appreciate that it's come up a number of times today. And finally, want to acknowledge that ADA compliance and ADA upgrades have been called out in a number of these projects, and appreciate that makes all of our buildings and programs more accessible to our community members. So thank you for including that in many of these projects.
Thank you, Commissioner Boss. Next, we have Commissioner Wardlow.
Thank you, Commissioner Chair. Thank you all very much for your time and efforts to bring this forward. Obviously, to me, I do find this consistent with the general plan. I really appreciate the work that everyone here has done to make this as comprehensive and easily to understand for the public as possible. In reviewing this massive document, it's exciting to see all of the work that will be happening in Santa Barbara in the coming years. As personally, it's a little frustrating to see certain things that it seems are required by the state that I don't see as a priority in the minds of what we need here in Santa Barbara. Like as an example, is the animal rescue aspects that are required for FAA that may be prioritized over something that I feel is more necessary here, like the Lower East Side and the drainage and water needs there. But to me, this is a great step forward, and I do support the findings, and I appreciate everyone's work.
Thank you, Commissioner Wardlow. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this time? I want to make sure everyone has a chance to deliberate. Commissioner Lodge or Commissioner Vice Chair Balke? Okay, then I will go ahead. Thank you. I would like to begin by speaking about the Garden Street facility improvements. Obviously, the people who work in that space are often here in chambers with us, either creating staff reports, presenting, planning projects in connection to the Planning Commission. And I hope that by improving their facility, it will only help all of us to work better together and improve the process of what we do here at the Planning Commission. So I'm looking forward to seeing that come to fruition. That item affects all of us sitting here on the dais, and it's a nice project to see on our list. I also want to thank you for your patience in addressing not one, but a number of my questions until we got to where I needed to be. Hopefully it will benefit anyone who may be watching or participating in this in this hearing today to understand how projects move through a queue, and some are unfunded, but they eventually move up the list and become priorities. That was not clear to me in the past. Today really helped, and now I feel like I really understand your hard work. I mean, it's not easy. You have to juggle a lot of departments and a lot of projects coming at you. So thank you for taking the time. I also want to echo Commissioner Wiscombe by saying thank you to all of the members of city staff we have here today. It's quite fun to have a number of faces and voices coming up to the microphone and speaking with us. It just shows how many different people and departments are affected by this work, and how many people it takes to get through this type of presentation and proposal and then benefit from it. It's all good news. Lastly, I just want to mention with regard to housing, whether it be workforce housing, whether it be state mandated housing, I would have liked to see more of that on today's in today's packet. It may already be there from a previous version, and so those might actually be in progress now, so we don't see it here, but I hope to see more of it the next time you all come forward with new proposals. I know that it's a lot of pressure, and we just want to keep that coming as much as possible. That being said, I find this draft CIP consistent with the general plan, and I will be in favor of supporting it. If we do not have any more comments at this time, I'll move forward to take a vote on whether the draft 5-year capital improvement program is consistent with the general plan. So can I have a motion, please? We have Commissioner Wiscombe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the projects added to the draft CIP are consistent with the general plan and for the 5-year capital improvement program for fiscal years 2024 to 2028.
I have two in line for a motion. I will take the first, which is Commissioner Lodge. Excuse me, not a motion, but a second.
This is to offer a second.
Thank you. Thank you. We're all getting used to our new setup here, so it'll take a little practice, but thank you. We have a motion and a second, so I will ask Ms. Esparza, could you please take a roll call vote?
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. I'll take the roll call vote. Commissioner Wardlow?
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe?
Yes.
Commissioner Boss?
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge?
Yes.
Vice Chair Bauke?
Yes.
And Chair Bonderson.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. We now close that item, and we're going to move on to our administrative agenda. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Have a great afternoon. We will begin with the appointment of a staff hearing officer liaison. I just want to let everyone know, if you don't already know, we will not be making any changes to our liaison assignments today. We will be waiting until our 7th planning commissioner is with us here on the dais to make any changes as a full group so that we don't have to change it again. Today, though, we do need to actively move forward on one appointment, and that is for the liaison position to the staff hearing officer, because that role remains vacant, and we do have staff hearing officer meetings between now and the time that our 7th planning commissioner will join us. Is there anyone among us that is interested in this role? Not a very popular request. Ms. DeBusk, how would you suggest we go about this? Should we offer it as a temporary position and then come back to it at a later time? What would you like us to do? Do we have an, oh, I shouldn't even ask that question. I was going to ask if we have an alternate. That's me. I might need to just step in, but is there any other option?
Commissioner Bonderson, or Chair Bonderson, yes, one option would be to have the alternate fill in, and then we could do the appointment at the time we do all of the other liaison appointments, once the 7th Planning Commissioner has joined you. I suppose we could also do a temporary appointment, although I'm not sure that makes as much sense.
Certainly. And while you were speaking, we actually have a commissioner in queue. Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I served as the liaison to the show. I can't think of what it stands for. Staff Hearing Officer in hearings for, I think, 2 or 3 years when I came back on the Planning Commission. And it's a good place to learn about what happens. So I'm just throwing that out there for someone who might be interested.
It's good to hear that encouragement, Commissioner Lodge. Thank you. It might have worked. So we have Commissioner Boss in queue. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I am interested in serving in this capacity, whether it's temporary or for the remainder of the year.
Great, thank you.
All right, so that's all you need. Does it require a vote?
Yes, it does require a vote. We would also want an alternate to be chosen.
You're not there, but I can see that you want to be there. Let's see, Commissioner Wardlow.
Thank you. I'm happy to be the alternate.
That's wonderful. Thank you both for volunteering, and we will go ahead and do a, let's see, do we want to do a vote for the position? And I'll just tell you what the position is. So it's the primary will be Commissioner Boss, the alternate would be Commissioner Wardlow, and it doesn't require a motion, we just vote. So could you please take a roll call vote for us? We need a motion. We do need a motion. Well, I'm happy to make that motion, so I will just put that into a motion. Can we have a roll call vote for that, please? Oh, in a second. Commissioner Balke? There you go.
Thank you, Chair Bonderson. I'll take the roll call vote. Commissioner Wiscombe?
Yes.
Commissioner Boss?
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge?
Yes.
Commissioner Wardlow?
Yes.
Vice Chair Balke?
Yes.
And Chair Bonderson.
Yes, thank
Motion
you.
passes. Thank you.
Thank you. We're still, I can tell that we're still getting used to looking at all the right devices and hitting all the right buttons. So thank you for your patience with us as we do this today. So next, we will move forward to liaison reports, and we do not have a staff hearing officer liaison report today, so we are safe and we'll move forward. Are there any other committees or liaison reports that we would like to hear today? Looking left and right, I just want to double check with Commissioner Lodge. Is there anything of importance? Okay. I have an ABR item, just one, and that will conclude our 2022 year. It was a project that came forward to the consent meeting on December 19, 2022, and it's simply a item of interest. It's a commercial building that is being converted to a 15-room or unit hotel. It has, actually, it's not 15 units. It's 15 hotel units with 11 units that have kitchenettes and 4 units of that 15 that have full kitchens. So it's being proposed somewhat as a long-term stay, that somebody visiting could have a kitchen in their hotel room, and it makes their stay more livable for long-term. I just wanted to bring that to our attention, since that's always something that we are hearing about, especially with regard to long-term stays. It is located at 1513 Delavina Street, and it was continued for final approval, which it received. And that concludes that presentation. If there's nothing else at this time, I will just conclude our January 19, 2023 Planning Commission hearing. It is now 3:53, and I'll just remind, 2:53, goodness, 2:53. I'm sorry, I added an extra hour there. But I want to just remind everyone that our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for February 2nd, 2023, and it may possibly be canceled, so keep an eye on your schedule. All right, everyone, have a great rest of your January.